May the words that I speak and the thoughts and wonderings within all of our hearts draw us closer to God, who is our rock and our Redeemer. So I've been thinking quite a bit about this question of wisdom and what is it that makes one wise. And I think I picked up a hint of it at the beginning of the passage about King Solomon. In his speech, he says, "Who am I to be king? I'm young. I don't even know in from out." That's something like not knowing your one body part from your other body part. That's what he's saying. The turns of phrases in different languages are different, and so they give us a literal translation, and sometimes we miss the point. He's saying, I don't know what I'm doing. How can I possibly be king? What a difference from Absalom last week. Absalom, Solomon's older half-brother, who had been trying to become king through all kinds of different means, definitely becoming more and more arrogant through the years, vigilante justice, all kinds of things. And here we have Solomon, who is the son of Bathsheba, which is, if you remember, there's a song by Leonard Cohen, and I saw her bathing on the roof, her beauty in the moonlight overthrew ya. That's a story from King David. Most of that song is actually about King David in one way or another. It's a story about King David going out on his roof and deciding, I want that one. And she had no real say in the matter, so we don't really know. The Bible doesn't teach us much about what she thought. But then King David arranged to have, when she got pregnant, King David arranged for her husband to come back. That was Uriah, and he refused to go to his wife because he was supposed to be fighting in the war, and if his comrades couldn't be with their wives, he wouldn't be with his either. And so David said, okay, sent him to the front, at the very front of the front, and then order retreat. In other words, David got him killed. Anyway, that's the story of Solomon's mommy and daddy and how they came to be together. And but for any number of reasons, Solomon is coming at this from a very different place. And he's approaching the throne with something that we don't see in some of the others: humility. Is this something that will be an honor for him? Not something that he is entitled to. And it's a switch of things functioning differently. The psalm says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom." And when I read that and heard that, and I've heard it many times, as you all have, I'm sure, that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, I thought about the different things that phrase could mean to some people, because it has been interpreted by people looking like me, talking to people looking like you. That psalm has been interpreted that the fear of the religious leaders is the beginning of wisdom, because they represent God. So you do what that pastor, that priest, that minister, that rabbi, this is a Hebrew scripture, that rabbi says, and that is wisdom. You be afraid of the minister. You get out the good china for the minister. Okay, if you want an excuse to get out the good china, I don't mind, but I'm good with the IKEA plastic cups too. I've been all things, and I've learned that I can do all things through the one who gives me strength. So, that means the strength to deal with the fear of handling your great grandmother to go to China. But that mentality, that fear of the religious establishment, and that fear of religious establishment does not bring wisdom. It brings almost the opposite. It brings a shutting down. See, I often think that phrase, the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, is best intended for leaders and people in power. For people who have no one to fear and nothing to fear. Because the other thing is that when you say the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, are you then saying that there are no wise atheists? You can get the stones after church, it's okay. Because I believe that there are people who embody wisdom, as we've defined here, when that's a secular definition, but there are people who are very wise who do not believe in God. But I think that the core of the statement is still deeply true in those people. Because great wisdom comes from acknowledging that there is something bigger than you. There is something beyond you. And whether or not that is interpreted as thinking about God, or if that is thinking about recognizing that there is more wisdom in the collective than any one person can hold. The wisdom that we hold together is greater than the wisdom that any of us can hold on our own. And the same becomes true in scientific and philosophical and every kind of pursuit, that when you can bring together the different thinking, more mature thinking can grow out of it. When you bring together a bunch of cells, you go from an organism that's simple to an organism that's complex. So, again, I'll say I believe that there are people who are wise who do not share our understanding of God. And that's okay. That's not something that we need to hold. As a church, that's something we can let go of. We can listen to and trust the wisdom of people without reading their creedal credentials. But what makes one wise? When I was thinking about that, and I was looking at that definition, and I always missed one when I was doing it on my own, is the ability to think and act using knowledge, experience, understanding, common sense, and insight. And that was from Wikipedia. These guys already knew that, but some of you just listened to the sermon. The beginning, the wisdom is made up of, experience, which is part of why we often link experience or wisdom with age. Age does not always bring wisdom, but if you let it, it will. Time passing will make a difference. I've been in ministry now. I shouldn't have started something that meant I had to math. 17 years? I've been in ministry now 17 years. And I think I'm wiser than I was when I started. I don't think I know as much, but I think I'm wiser. See, knowledge is just facts. And if you know the facts, it can help you put together and understand what's going on. But wisdom involves the ability to interpret the facts, the ability to make sense of it and incorporate it. Understanding. Some of the things understanding and common sense to me seems like they're just word fillers. They don't make a lot of sense. I'm not going to talk about them. And what was that last one? Insight. And insight is the one that gets closest to where I think the heart of saying the beginning of wisdom is the fear of God. It's the ability to synthesize, to make something bigger out of something more simple, to make a recipe out of ingredients, to make a poem out of words, to make a forest out of a bunch of plants, or a garden. That ability to bring things up a level is wisdom. But there's one thing that stands in the way of wisdom more than anything else. And I believe the one thing that stands in the way of wisdom more than anything else is pride. Is not self-confidence, not an honest appraisal of ourselves, both our strengths and our weaknesses. But the idea that we are the smartest, that we know best. When we listen to Solomon, that's one thing he makes clear, that he doesn't know best. He doesn't have all the information. He wants more information. See, the wisest people are lifelong learners. Those who say, teach me. Those who say, I don't know, help me understand. Do you remember the first time a kid was smarter than you? Like, the kid knew how to do something that you don't know how to do. Or a kid was the expert. And one that's standing out in my mind was that I was in a store and I needed to buy something and I didn't really understand much about the thing. I think I was probably in Staples and I needed to buy a doodad to make the one computer thing do the other computer thing. And, there's a part of me that's standing there saying, that could be standing there saying, I am so smart. I went to university for 8 years. I, blah, 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 blah. I am the wise one, and you are the 17-year-old working in the store. But the thing is that the 17-year-old working in the store knows what I don't know. And if I am full of myself, I'm going to say, I'm not going to listen to them. But if I am wise, I am going to admit that I don't know. Like when I read that passage from John and I said, I don't know. Jesus says we're supposed to eat his flesh and drink his blood. And I mean, it just seems like Jesus is saying you really, 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 really have to do communion. And it feeling like it just doesn't feel right and I don't know what to say about it. And I don't know. And maybe because I've been in ministry for a long time and I've got the education, what would be considered, I'm the full meal deal in that I've got an MDiv, so that's the kind of thing that could make a person proud. But I felt like I can admit this. I took a course on the Gospel of John. It was a very good course and I did quite well in it. And I still don't know what to do with this text. I admitted that, and maybe in the next few weeks you'll hear me say something more intelligent. I did pick up one little tidbit though, and that is that there is no Last Supper in the Gospel of John. That whole institution where Jesus breaks the bread and this is my body broken for you. And on the night when Jesus was betrayed, he took the bread and said, take and eat, do this in remembrance of me. The Eucharistic, that means the communion, communion. All these big words. This happens, you go to school, you learn a whole lot of big words. And then you have to leave, when you leave school, you have to learn how to say the things with big words using little words again. So the communion-y-ness of John is rooted not in Jesus' death, but in his life. In the Gospel of John, the communion is woven through the whole Gospel. The thing in John 6 where Jesus goes on, like for 4 weeks we hear Jesus saying, I am the bread of life. And this is the first time that I have come across this passage of Scripture at least since about 2005 or whatever. Since I first started my ministry, it would have been one of those years when I have not been in team ministry, so I didn't have to do every single week that are all about the same thing. This passage where Jesus is saying, and since I'm the bread of life every single week, I can't talk about that for 4 weeks. The Gospel of John is deeply mystical. And what Jesus, and it is doing a lot of different things all at once. The idea of that we need to take the life force which is in Jesus into our very selves. Again, this is the first few threads of me trying to pick apart some of the wonderful things my colleagues sent me when I said, I don't know. I really don't know. Like I said before, Gospel of John is a bit of the antithesis of wisdom, the separating out of us and them, the good and the bad, and that is expressed in some very unfortunate ways that have led to 2 millennia of anti-Semitism. So it is not perfect, but it is something that is deeply resonant. It fits with us. When something resonates, that's when it shakes. So when something is at the right speed or the right pitch, do you ever notice that at the right speed or the right pitch of noise, maybe a train going by, at some speeds it makes everything shake, and at some speeds it doesn't? The Gospel of John is at the right speed to echo in our heartstrings. And it bases itself on that text about wisdom. Gospel of John, right at the beginning. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word came among us. That passage is basically taken directly out of Proverbs, where it's speaking about wisdom. So it is mystical. It is hard to understand. It doesn't have easy answers. In other words, the answer, the opposite of a simple truth is a lie. The library is not open today. The library is open today. The opposite of a big truth is another big truth. Light is a wave. Light is a particle. That was really scientific. Jesus is human. Jesus is divine. Jesus is bread. Jesus is wine. They're big ideas to think on and quite literally to chew on. So what is wisdom? What is the source of wisdom? I believe it is humility. It is the ability to say, I don't know, teach me. Thanks be to God. Amen.